Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Jew and Gentile podcast. I am your host, Chris Katolka, and with me is my co-host. He likes that title, co-host.
Love that title. I love co-host.
Steve Herzig. Great to have you, Steve.
Great to be here, Chris.
We got a great episode coming up for you. We're still continuing our study on Leviticus as we dance our way through the law, right, Steve?
Lounging through Leviticus.
That's
I like
right.
That.
So we're going to continue with Leviticus. Man, we've got a great show. We're going to be talking about FOI Equip. We're going to be talking about things that are happening in the news, some important things and Jewish culture, and then the Yiddish word of the day. There we go.
Chris, I've had people already tell me they look forward, they wonder what will be the Yiddish word of the day.
Oh, do they say that?
They do. They wonder. Yeah.
I was thinking to myself, what happens when we run out of Yiddish words?
Not a problem.
We've got plenty.
They will outlive me. That's for sure. You might need a new co-host, but no problem.
I was thinking about we could go to Hebrew words, but we have our friends in Pittsburgh, our colleagues, Jeff and Arlene Berg, who are they know Yiddish, they teach Yiddish, and they said we're going to send you some Yiddish curses, okay? Not curse words, not bad words, but Yiddish curses that are almost comedic.
They are very comedic.
Yeah, so maybe we'll do one. Maybe we'll transition from a Yiddish word to a Yiddish curse, and have a good laugh.
It might be. We have some listeners. Maybe they could put in a request. We could tell them how they could email us if they have a request for a Yiddish idiom or a Yiddish curse, and we'll see. We might take requests. I could be moved.
Yeah, and that could be fun to say, to our listeners. Hey, if you have a Yiddish word that maybe you grew up with and you said, and you didn't even realize it was Yiddish because it's just baked into American culture and English.
True.
We could have a discussion about it. So here, you know what, Steve? I'll just do this. My email address is Chris Katolka. So it's ckatolka at FOI.org.
They need help with the Katolka. They need Katolka help.
I know. It's CKATULKA at FOI.org. Email me and we'll throw up. We'll put up. We'll put up.
Oh man.
We will put up the your Yiddish word. We'll take some requests, if you will.
We would be very interested in Yiddish requests.
So we've, like I said, we've got a great show lined up, a great podcast. Steve, I've been having fun with these podcasts. The reason that we're doing this, the reason that we do the Jew and Gentile podcast, it's built within the framework of our FOI Equip. But we do this because we believe that learning and studying the Bible from a Jewish perspective can really alter the way that somebody engages with the Lord Jesus.
Absolutely. And not only is the context important, but I think the Jew and Gentile podcast, I hope it's eliciting that we've had a great time each time we do this, and people can have a great time studying the Word of God. It doesn't have to be drudgery.
No.
And we don't have to approach the Bible. Certainly it's inspired. Every word is God breathed. It's holy. All those things are true, but God wants to fellowship with us. We're fellowshipping together. We're communicating together, and God welcomes communication. It's not a one-way street. This is God talking to us. And when we read his word and understand it, we can ask him questions.
Yeah.
We can pursue the relationship. So I hope our listeners are picking that up as we go through Leviticus.
And this is just a great way. Honestly, we just love that our listeners are tuning into the Jew and Gentile podcast because it connects you really to what Friends of Israel is doing as well. Steve, before we get into Leviticus, we did something fun today at Friends of Israel headquarters. It's actually, I think, one of my favorite days here. We've built Hanukkah baskets.
What a treat. This is our 5th or 6th year. We started our first year with 30 baskets that we distributed around southern Jersey and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And from the very start of delivering, the people who got these baskets were just amazed. Why would you give that to us? Thank you very much. Sometimes our deliverers are people who work here at the office, and they were at first somewhat intimidated. And I said don't be intimidated about delivering a gift.
That's right.
They've been welcomed with open arms, and it has created all kinds of conversation that a Christian would take the time to give a gift at Hanukkah to a Jewish person. And Chris, this morning, you and I, amongst probably a dozen to 2 dozen people, constructed or built or put together, what, about
It
120
it was,
baskets?
I think, between 100 and 120 baskets, individual baskets, Hanukkah baskets that are filled with Israeli food. So, there's Israeli sea salts in there. There's tahini sauce. There's
Oh,
halava.
you're killing me, Chris.
I
I'm
know.
getting hungry here.
The halava bars to eat. Oh, my favorite is the nana tea. That is very Israeli, very Middle Eastern. We have nana tea for people. There's so many little goodies in the Hanukkah basket. And it's just a joy to be able to show up during the Christmas season and to say to our Jewish friends who are probably used to hearing Merry Christmas all the time or Happy Holidays, to hear Happy Hanukkah from
And
your
this year,
Christian friend.
this year, it's right after Thanksgiving. It begins right after
Very early.
our Thanksgiving. But we tell the Jewish people as well, these are Israeli goods because we are the friends of Israel. We want to support Israel. We want to make sure that when we purchase something as a gift at Hanukkah, that we're supporting Israeli entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
And that impresses them even more.
Yep.
So it's remarkable.
And, honestly, if you're at home right now and you're going, "Oh, this is a great idea to give a Hanukkah gift to a Jewish friend," maybe you have a Jewish friend. Well, you can actually go to our website right now and you could purchase a gift, a Hanukkah gift box, which pretty much has everything in it. And you can actually yourself have it delivered to your Jewish friend, or you could have it delivered to your house and you could deliver it to them and say Happy Hanukkah. They're beautiful boxes. It's amazing.
They could do either one, but I highly recommend having it sent to them if they're close by and deliver it personally.
Yes.
There's just no substitute. I remember when I was in Canada talking to a friend of mine who was talking to me about his Jewish neighbor, and I recommended he buy. We didn't offer the baskets then, but I recommended, hey, Hanukkah's coming up. Buy a basket, have it, really nice, and deliver it with your wife to his neighbor. And he said, I never thought of that before. Would you coach me? I said, there's not a whole lot to coach. Make sure it looks nice. Bring your wife. Say Happy Hanukkah. And we thought of you this season. He called me as he said, I hardly talked to the woman at all for a whole year and a half since she moved in. And this Hanukkah basket, I'm going over. She invited my wife and I to her house. We then invited them to our house, and we're friends now.
Yeah.
And look what happened. That's what the Lord Jesus wants us to do.
I love the one story, and I don't mean to belabor this, but I love the one story where you showed up at a house, you had the gift basket in your hand, and the next thing you know, you're sitting down drinking a cup of coffee, not cheap coffee either, with a Jewish friend of yours, all just because you were saying Happy Hanukkah.
Well, he wasn't a friend of mine until
That's right.
the basket.
That's right. I forgot.
And he was a coffee expert. He had 6 different ways he cooked or brewed coffee. And I didn't even know there were 6 different ways. And he said, well, normally I do this and I do that, but today I decided to do this. Hey, you want a cup? Let's sit down and talk. And we did. It was unbelievable.
That's these are the kind of doors that are opened when, and I love the way that the Friends of Israel ministers to people. We really believe in the model that Jesus gave us, which was to serve. I love when Matthew and Mark use that the verbiage that Jesus says, the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom. And if you can get your mind wrapped around the fact that when Jesus calls himself the Son of Man, he's calling himself the King of Israel. He's calling himself the King of Kings. And he comes and he says, the King of Kings did not come to be served like most kings are when they have their butlers and their entourage and all this. The Son of Man came to not to be served, but to serve. And that's the model we want to give. We really believe that is the greatest way to open doors to sharing the love of who Jesus is.
Chris, I couldn't put it any better. But we haven't even got to Leviticus
I know.
yet.
I get so excited.
We're rambling on, and we got to move on.
I was just saying to Steve, we need to get to Leviticus right away. That's why people are coming. And look, we're rambling. Okay, so anyway, Hanukkah gift boxes. You can go to FOI.org and purchase yours before Hanukkah. Go do that. FOI.org. Steve. Leviticus, we're already in chapter 5 and 6.
Well, that's a way of looking at it. I could say Man, we're only in chapter 5. You're positive, negative. Is the glass half empty or half full?
I'm an optimistic kind of guy.
There you go. So we're already in Leviticus chapter 5. And it's interesting the way it's worded. I just like to read the first 2 verses of chapter 5. And really, I'd like you to read them as well. But I'm going to read it from the King James Version first.
Okay.
And then I'd like you to do it. You're using the NIV. And the reason is not to get into a controversy of translations,
No.
but to give a nuance and also a way for Bible study. Is getting different translation helps us as we take the inspired word and try to get a wrap.
That's right, because behind it is the Hebrew.
Exactly. So my first 2 verses that I'm going to read are found in Leviticus chapter 5. And it says, if a soul sin and hear the voice of swearing and is a witness, whether he hath seen or known of it, if he do not utter it, then he shall bear his iniquity. That doesn't sound too good.
No.
Or if a soul touch any unclean thing, whether it be a carcass of an unclean beast, or a carcass of an unclean cattle, or the carcass of an unclean creeping thing, and if it be hidden from him, he also shall be unclean and guilty. Carcass, dead stuff.
This is why people skip over Leviticus.
Exactly.
This is why, like we talk about, the pages are stuck together.
Yep.
But there's a lot of richness here, and I'm hoping we
There's
can
a
unpack
lot of richness.
that.
Go ahead, read it in the version you have.
Yeah, I have the NIV, and it says this: if anyone sins because they do not speak up when they hear a public charge to testify regarding something they have seen or learned about, they will be held responsible. If anyone becomes aware that they are guilty if they unwittingly touched anything ceremonially unclean, whether the carcass of an unclean animal, wild or domestic, or of any unclean creature that moves along the ground, and they are unaware that they have become clean, but then they come to realize their guilt, or if they touch a human uncleanliness, and it goes on and on about the fact that by touching something unclean, they realize their guilt.
As we hear the nuance of difference, I think we need both. I like this contrast.
Yes.
Your version, the NIV, makes it's more readable. It's our vernacular. What we describe as who wants to travail through Leviticus, if you're reading carcass and voice of swearing, when you put the 2 together, you understand this is serious.
Yeah.
This is serious. There is a separation between clean and unclean,
Yes.
between how we approach God and when we can't approach God. And at the center, it seems to me, Chris, is the holiness of God and the sinfulness or the dirtiness, if you will, of man.
It goes back to the very first episode we did of our podcast and the very first lesson that we gave on Leviticus. It all starts with the fact that God's glory, his physical presence, his holiness is now present in the tabernacle. And so God's presence is there. The sanctuary is a holy, holy, holy place. And now outside of the sanctuary are unclean people, sinful people, guilty people. And so you have this paradox, if you will. You have a holy God in his grace interacting with a sinful people, and there has to be some way for these 2 to relate. And that's what this is all about.
You just did something that I think most of us don't do when we read the text. We started here in Leviticus 5 and read it. You went back to our beginning study, which is the beginning of Leviticus, where we went to Exodus and saw God transferring, if you will. I know he's everywhere all the time, but he was at Mount Sinai, his presence. And now he's in the tabernacle. And that's the context. That's the backstory of each time we read the text.
Yeah.
So when any believer opens up a text, it's a great reminder, unless he's in Genesis 1 and verse 1, that there is something behind what he's reading. And you can't always review in your head, but context is so important. Here we are in Leviticus 5, and you go back to Leviticus 1 and even Exodus, the end. That helps us contextually. The God who is holy, his presence is before the people. And here are all these practical, that's a key word, practical situations that human beings, Jewish human beings, find themselves, and God is regulating how. If you, hey, you're going to be involved in this. People die, animals die, things happen. I'm aware of that, but you need to be aware when you're doing all that. Oh, wait a minute. This takes me. This takes me away. I can't go into the presence of God there at the tabernacle because now I'm unclean.
Now I'm unclean. And also, even when you go back, because I even think a lot of times we forget how much God values integrity and honesty as a part of the life that is honoring to him. And that comes across here right away in Leviticus chapter 5 when it says, if anyone sins because they do not speak up when they hear a public charge to testify regarding something they have seen or learned about, they will be held responsible. And so what you see is that there's a sense of responsibility. There is a sense of honesty and integrity that God values when it comes. Let's say somebody sees an event happen, and it ends up in the court of law. If you know something, but let's say you harbor anger or something toward the person, and so I'm not going to say, I'm not going to let that, the judge know or the jury know that they weren't even there that night. They were with me, but I'm just so angry at whatever. God is saying, no, it doesn't matter whatever you're feeling. You have to bring your testimony and to the court, and whatever you see must be spoken in honesty. That's actually the reason why I believe God said, in order for someone to be found guilty, there has to be, it's the law of two witnesses. Two people have to testify together in honesty. Two people have to testify to the fact that they saw something happen. Somebody can't just come up and go, I saw that, and the guy ends up in jail. Two witnesses have to corroborate their account, and then the courts rule it out. But God values honesty. That's really important.
Chris, I heard you use the word, and I can't tell you. It's a word that we use, but very few people have, and that's the word integrity.
Integrity.
Integrity. It's hard. It's hard because that's an objective thing. If you always tell the truth, you'll never have to worry about telling the story over again. But
Mhm.
if you lie, if you don't tell the truth, you're forever trying to figure out. The more interviews you get, you got to make sure that you tell it exactly the way you made it up the first time.
Yep.
But when you're always gonna, if you tell the truth, you never have to be afraid of lying.
It comes back to this idea too of understanding the law. We live in a country where we separate religion. What we like to do is separate religion from law. We keep our law over here, and we separate the church and in the state, and we keep our religion over here. This is a point where law and practice of your faith collide with one another, because that's what the 10 commandments were. The 10 commandments built into the 10 commandments were, how do I love God? How do I worship God? But then it was also, how do I relate with you, Steve? And those things were never separated. The legalities of how I would relate with you and how I would worship God were actually intertwined with one another, so that when we come to these things, when we talk about the courts, we're actually talking about courts, and being honest to testify the things that you see. That's all built into what the law of God demanded. It wasn't something separate. It was something built into the practice of who you were as an Israelite.
Jesus took and summarized the law with just two basic things. I'm sure you remember. He said you need to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and you need to love your neighbor as yourself. That summarizes really all the things we're learning here. So that would be, if we were outlining it, we could take the New Testament of Jesus's words at the top and now go to Leviticus and see how all those things play out.
That it's actually his words are so true. How if you love your neighbor, then you don't want to be envious of them. You wouldn't want to take from them. You wouldn't want to kill them. You wouldn't want to, it really. And if you love the Lord your God, then you're going to worship him the way that he asked you to come. You're going to follow the law. You're going to follow. So yeah, really, if you think about it, those two principles, everything else hangs on those two, which is what Jesus talked about. But we want to talk about this idea of uncleanliness,
Oh, brother.
trafe.
Yeah, Jewish people, again, this is a general statement about our people. We're germophobias. Unclean. We don't like unclean. Again, I'm making a generalization, and I say it with, I'm one of them, by the way. Uh, I have pretty uh, good rules, I would say, for myself as far as things go. I could tell you this as a seasoned traveler, men are pigs.
Yeah.
That's the only way I could tell you. Going to a bathroom in a airport, it is so disgusting for me. We have to use it. But washing hands, the simple thing of washing hands, not good.
Yeah.
Uncleanness, I'm telling you, it's a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah, even I have 3 sons, they all live in the same room on the 3rd floor of our home, and I go up there and I think, "Oh my god," my wife will spend so much time cleaning that room. I'll get up there and, clean it up, and 3 minutes later, the thing's a mess. There's food wrappers. I think, "You guys live like pigs," and it starts at a young age.
It does
It really starts at
It
a young
does.
age, and you can see if it's not coached, it can just get worse and worse. But I want to talk about this concept of uncleanliness because a lot of times I think we just think of uncleanliness as a sin. But God is saying you're going to be unclean. Like it's going to happen. At some point you're going to come across a carcass, a
Yes.
dead animal. At some point you're going to touch you're going to do something as a human that will make you.
People die.
Yeah,
They're gonna have to move the body.
that's
They're
right.
gonna have to put it in a burial site. These things are normal things. God knows that, but the consequences of even normal activity, including animals, killing an animal for food, koshering it, etc., that puts them in an unclean state.
And it wasn't about the fact that they were unclean because God provided a way to become clean. That's what's important. It's about the idea that surrounding the tabernacle is holiness, and your uncleanliness can make the holiness of that place unclean. God wants to make sure everything stays spick and span. And so when it comes to the holiness factor of it, and so a lot of it had to do with the purification not only of yourself but the purification of the tabernacle, making sure everything was
A lot
was
of water in the tabernacle worship. A lot of water.
but the sin is whether or not you do what you're supposed to do in order to become clean again.
Obedience.
Obedience to the Lord. I mean, when I tell, even this morning, my daughter would hate that I would say this, but I said, "Did you brush your teeth?" Silence. Just silence in the car. You didn't. Your mom asked you to brush your teeth. You, I asked you to brush your. You didn't listen. And now it's not even about the brushing of the teeth. It's you didn't even listen to me. I could go on and on. I'm sure you have 4 kids. They're grown now, but the stories.
We have stories.
Yeah, I'm sure you've got stories. Maybe I shouldn't throw my kids under the bus so quickly, but the idea is that the obedience to not listen becomes the issue because God actually provided a way for there to be cleanliness.
And isn't it natural? Let's look at your kids. They did what comes natural. It's natural. We have to train them in order to do the right things, not to train them to do the wrong thing. That's why you're checking up on them. Isn't that the way adults are as it relates to God too? The natural thing to do is to not be interested in what we're supposed to be, what God wants us to be interested in.
Yes.
For instance, we get into our car on a typical day, and if you asked yourself the question, did you spend time with God
Yeah.
today?
Yeah.
Did you have a time? Did you let God know that He goes before you, and you know that? Even an acknowledgement to Him. How many of us would be guilty because of our? Oh, I'm sure Olive had great reason. Oh, Dad, this happened, that happened. I in a hurry. I didn't know Mom was going to leave so fast. Or you? There's always a reason.
Yep.
Again, don't we do this? Oh man, I got up late. The alarm went off late. I had a meeting that I wasn't aware of. I had this, I had that. And the Spirit of God is simply saying, "Hey, did you meet with God today?"
Yeah. There's a line, Steve, that I see places. I think it's hanging up in my mother and father-in-law's bathroom that says cleanliness is next to godliness. And it's a picture of some kids diving into a bathtub, full of soap and bubbles. And my mind, when I read Leviticus, sometimes I think if I were to just completely remove God from it, and let's just talk about the basic essentials of Leviticus. Let's say we remove God from the picture. It sounds like hygiene.
Absolutely.
And then you put God in the middle of it and you go, no, this is holiness. What is the balance? I'm asking you, I'm interested to know your thoughts. Like, what's the balance between, hey, yeah, if you hang around a dead body too long, there could be some health problems. Or if you don't do this, there could be health problems. And then also connecting that to the holiness of God. Was God looking out for the Israelite as well? Do you think there was some hygienic element to what Leviticus is doing?
That's an interesting question. The law is holy, just, and good. I believe that God gave these laws as a means to teach us about his intrinsic character.
Yeah.
But there are benefits from that main lesson. Later on in history, the Jewish people are going to be persecuted in so many different places. And in fact, I know in one of our Equip courses, we're going to talk about anti Semitism. And one of the main charges of those who are anti Semitic is that the Jews are dirty, they're filthy,
Mm-hmm.
they're less than human, they're like cockroaches
Vermin.
and
Yeah.
vermin. When the Jewish person could say, well, I know that's your accusation, but we have a book that we live by that uses more water per person
Yep.
than any other. So the argument that we're dirty is not a fair argument. Our whole system, using the term religious system, is built around cleanliness because God is holy. He wants us to be clean. And that's an outside cleanness, which hopefully will be, as we're conscious of who God is, will have an inward cleanse as well.
I'm reminded of the psalm, "Give me clean hands, give me a pure heart." The connection between the two, and even you and I go through Passovers all the time. We've done them together online, live and online. We've done them in person with people, and we always come back to the idea of the meaning of water and purification. I mean, in the Middle East at the time of Jesus, and even before and after, water is a commodity. It's an in demand commodity, and to use it to wash your hand, to use it to wash your feet, to use it to purify your body before you go into the temple, when you should be drinking it, it shows the value of what it meant that the Jewish people had a real sense of priority to cleanliness.
Well, when the Jewish people were accused of starting and spreading Black Plague,
Yeah.
uh, they didn't they didn't do it. It had to do with rats. It had to do with uncleanliness, and the Jewish people were the cleanest bunch around. That's why none of them got it.
That's, as we wrap up here, I think of Leviticus. We went through Leviticus chapter 5, but I want to encourage you to read through Leviticus chapter 6 because and the reason I'm only moving through it quickly is because it actually kind of wraps up and does a synopsis of the burnt offering. It follows back up again. You remember we started with the burnt offering in chapter 1. It goes to the grain offering. It goes to the sin offering. Next week, we'll start with the guilt offering. And this is such an interesting word because it begins to appear in Leviticus chapter 5 and moves on. So we'll talk about guilt next week. It sounds great, huh? Come on back and let's talk about your guilt.
Our people invented guilt, Chris. That's for sure.
They make you feel guilty. Did you grow up feeling guilty?
Oh, guilty about everything. It's everything. We greet each other and say, "Is anything okay?"
Well, we're going to talk about that next week. Maybe we can have a counseling session or some therapy with it, Steve. So we're going to close our time in Leviticus. I hope this has been a blessing to you as we talk about bringing to life Leviticus and really what it means as a Christian to go through it. We hope it's a blessing to you. We want to continue though because we have a fantastic FOI Equip class that's going on right now called "What on Earth is God Doing?" that Tom Simcox, our very own Tom Simcox, is teaching. What on Earth is God Doing is a 6-week study. We're actually entering into week 5, believe it or not. 4. We're entering into week 4. Okay, thank you. I apologize. Week 4. See, that's why it's good to have a co-host to correct me here. Quality control.
Even a blind squirrel gets a nut once in a while.
So Tom's been doing a great job going through it. And if you want to be a part of this class, which really looks at the spiritual conflict, the whole thing really is looking at the battle between God and Satan, and how the biblical story plays out. Has Satan's always been trying to stop God's plan. God continues to show Satan who the victor is. But this is a great Bible study. It's walking us from Genesis to Revelation and everything in between. You can go to gofoi.org/what on earth to register for the remaining classes. You can come whenever you want. This is a live online Zoom class. It starts 7:30 Eastern time. What on earth is God doing? Again, gofoi.org/what on earth. I also would like to remind you of really quick 2 more things. If you want to support Israel and show love to Israel and the Jewish people, November 7th, 7 p.m., we are having a live online Thank God for Israel, which will bring the Jewish community and the Christian community together to thank God for Israel. And actually, we're going to have a special guest. His name is Dan Pollock. He is the Director of Government Relations for the Zionist Organization of America. He'll be talking about the U.S.-Israeli relationship, its strengths and weaknesses. And we're going to be celebrating our host, Tim Munger, who's been organizing these Thank God for Israel days. This is going to be his 50th Thank God for Israel.
It is amazing. But Chris, I have a question for this kind of a conference, online virtual conference. How much are we charging? I mean, what's the registration fee?
We're going to stick with the price that we've been doing for the past couple of months, which is free.
Sounds like a plan.
That sounds like a deal.
Not only is it a bargain because it's free, but seriously, I joke about it. The idea of a person in their home being able to tune in, they could become an advocate for Israel, supporter of Israel, by simply showing up on their computer by their interest in the dialogue between the Jewish community and the evangelical community as we honor is that's the key. We want to honor Israel. Jewish people want to honor Israel. Most of them, not all of them do, but most of them do. And Christians as well. And again, not all Christians value Israel, but those that do, it just shows it's an encouragement. You've been to Israel a number of times. How encouraging is it when an Israeli finds out that Christians want to support and help them?
I always like to give the story of this. This guy had to be close to 7 feet, and I'm not even exaggerating. This huge Russian guy. He was a guard at the hospital that we were doing volunteer work at, Kaplan Medical Center.
He's one of the few tall Jewish people around.
And just imagine this big Russian guy too. And he wanted to know what I was doing there. And I told him who we were. And I told him about Friends of Israel Gospel Ministry. And I told him the work that we were doing. And he started tearing up. I can't. And if you don't know me, I'm a short guy. Okay. So I probably came up to his belly button, when he brought me in for a big hug. But he was crying. And he goes, honestly, there are so many Israelis that just think the world hates them. And to hear that there are people who are willing to stop what they're doing to come to Israel and to clean, mop floors and clean toilets and be volunteer at this hospital, it just is overwhelming.
And we're not asking people to do that for this. All we're asking them to do, if they're interested, is to show up on their computer and hear what will undoubtedly be a great presentation, and also to be able to see Christians and Jewish people from all over the place, because we're online, and their support for Israel.
Can I add one more thing too? It's so informal. And I mean this in a good way. The last one I did, the last Thank God for Israel I did online through Zoom. I was helping out with some of the tech. And this lady comes on and she's got her apron on and she's looking in an amazing Jewish woman. And I started talking with her and I said, "What are you doing?" She goes, "Oh, I'm making some spaghetti sauce. I'm cooking dinner while I listen to you guys." And I said, "Oh, this is fantastic." I said, "Can we come over for dinner?" She said, "Everyone come over for dinner."
That's great.
But she was just there doing her normal routine with her computer next to her, listening. I don't care how you come, whatever, come and be a part of what we're doing to show your love and support of Israel.
Perk a cup of coffee before you come.
That's right. So you can go to gofoi.org/TGFI50. That's TGFI50. And then pretty soon we'll have some news coming out of our upcoming Hanukkah class, something that you're not going to want to miss to be a part of a Hanukkah celebration. It's going to be fun. Steve, what's going on in the news?
Well, on jewishnews.com, Chris, I came across this. And when former President Trump was able to get the Abraham Accords through, it was a tremendous blessing. And I still think we're seeing the advantages of that. But even before that, he moved he moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And a lot of people on the other side of the aisle were not happy with that. There were a few who were, but most were not, and were outspoken against it. Well, when Joe Biden was campaigning, he promised that he would not move the embassy back out, but he did say that he would move a Palestinian consulate into Jerusalem. Chris, that's a problem.
Big time.
It's a big problem. And what it does is it makes him look good. See, I'm not touching what's already there. That was a law passed in 1995 that was finally executed by President Trump. If Joe Biden moves the consulate, the embassy into Jerusalem, he's mucking up the waters, because that's going to undo that 95 law.
So we're talking about the fact that before President Trump, the United States had an embassy in Tel Aviv.
Correct.
Israel is the only country in the world, I believe, if I remember correctly, the only country in the world where its capital is Jerusalem, but most people keep their embassies in Tel Aviv to make a statement.
Up until that time, the capital of Israel was designated by a country that is not named Israel. Think about that.
Yeah.
They were the only country that could not name their own location of a capital.
Countries get a chance to say, this is our capital. Washington, D.C. is our capital. And then everybody plants the countries plant their embassies there. Israel is the only country that said, Jerusalem's our capital. And they said, we don't think so.
Yeah.
We're going to put ourselves in Tel Aviv because we know Tel Aviv is an Israeli city. And so for decades, the ambassadors would drive back and forth between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. If you wanted to meet with the leaders, government, the Knesset, you would have to go from Tel Aviv and drive 45 minutes, an hour to Jerusalem, and then back again. Trump changes all that by enacting a law, the 95 law, it's called the Jerusalem Embassy Act, to move the embassy to Jerusalem. And this is important, Steve, because
really important.
Let's just go back to 1995. Let's talk about what was happening there.
First of all, when the law was passed, as hard as it to believe in 2021, I think it was all except 3 votes. I'm not 100% sure, but
in Senate,
it's less than 10 for sure. I think it's 3. But everybody else, Democrat and Republican, said yes, the capital of Israel should be in Jerusalem. But they put a provision in there that every 6 months, starting from the immediate passage, the president has the veto power to postpone it, not eliminate it, but postpone it because of security issues. And those are in quotation marks.
That's right.
So whatever the president seems to think is dangerous or is a security risk, he can kick the can down the road. Well, Chris,
that was a 6-month waiver. Every 6 months, they signed a waiver.
Every 6 months. So from 1995 till President Trump executed, and by the way, his first term, he kicked the can himself.
He did.
He did. So all these years have passed where the will of the people, that each of the representatives represents the people. The will of the people was, yes, move it there. And by an overwhelming majority, it wasn't executed until Donald Trump finally did it. That's important to remember.
It's important to remember that there was bipartisan approval, almost unanimously. Did I say that right?
Unanimous.
Thank you. In order to move the embassy from Tel Aviv in 1995. We've probably gone through, you probably know this already if you're listening, maybe you don't, but it was the idea that they wanted to move it there from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. But, there was a bipartisan approval of it. The only reason I was reading, that waiver, that presidential waiver was put in there is because Bill Clinton was actually challenging Congress because he felt as though Congress was being unconstitutional in enacting foreign policy that is actually a presidential duty. So I think it was Bob Dole who said, all right, well, we'll put this provision in there so you can kick the can down the road since presidents are the ones who usually drive foreign agendas. So they did that. The other thing I learned about this bill, Steve, the 95 Embassy Act, was that if the embassy wasn't moved by May of 1999, then every single embassy in the world that's a U.S. embassy would lose 50% of its maintenance bill. So they were going to cut across the board 50% of all of the upkeep and maintenance and all that for every embassy around the world if that thing's not moved. But the presidential waiver continued to kick the can down the road.
It's politics. It actually astounded many people, including Republicans, when Donald Trump did it. I would tell you, I don't know if he was in the minority, but there were people very concerned that it would start a war, that it would make the Middle East unstable, just the same reason that that little thing was added, for security reasons. But Chris, at least from the time it was executed till the time Trump left office, was there any trouble in the Middle East?
Nope. No. Here's what's interesting, though. Let me read a section for you, because this is why it plays a role in what we're talking about when Biden says he wants to move the consulate, the Palestinian consulate, into East Jerusalem. It says this as a part of the 1995 law, the Jerusalem Embassy Act. It says Jerusalem should remain an undivided city in which the rights of every ethnic and religious group are protected. Jerusalem should be recognized as the capital of the state of Israel, and the U.S. Embassy in Israel should be established in Jerusalem no later than May 1999. So Congress said something in this bill that was ratified. They said Jerusalem is the undivided capital of the state of Israel, which means before, what would happen is they would say, okay, West Jerusalem is Israel's and East Jerusalem will be a Palestinian state. And Congress agreed with the state of Israel and said, no, we believe all of Jerusalem, can't divide it, all of it, East Jerusalem, West Jerusalem, you can't divide it, it's one. So now, if Biden moves the consulate into Jerusalem, he's actually saying something. He's saying, we believe East Jerusalem should be or could be a Palestinian capital.
And in fact, Chris, as you said that, and it's really important. I hope our listeners understood what you were saying. The GOP definitely understands that concept. And that's why there's a bill, a GOP bill, that's been signed by a number of Republican, a lot of them, who want to counter what Joe Biden is doing. And they're, according to the article that I've read, first of all, the person who will be the deciding vote, they believe, is Kamala Harris, because it could be a 50-50 divide, which means that if it should go to vote, which I hope it does, it will really label forever in the records that the Democratic Party was against doing this.
This will be really interesting if this goes, see whether or not the Democratic Party approves of a consulate, because number one, it goes up against this 1995 bill, but also, I mean, it will show how in less than 20 years, the entire bipartisan approach to Israel has just unwound
completely. And the other thing is that's very important, and that Joe Biden would have to deal with, and the Democratic Party, is Israel's the final one that determines if that consulate could go in there. And the mayor, let me quote the mayor, Mayor Moshe Leon, on Tuesday said he does not think the consulate will be reopened.
I don't think it will go in.
So, but that's good. But there's going to be a lot of noise about this. You can count on that.
You know, this is such an important topic. I hope that you keep your eyes and your ears open. We'll keep you updated too if things progress. But keep your eyes open on what's going on in the news there. I hope that brings some clarity. Maybe if you're reading and you're wondering what's going on in Jerusalem right now, especially as it relates to American policy. But Steve, let's change gears because we have something kind of fun now. Okay, let's move from the serious to the what am I trying to say? Maybe whet my appetite here for what's coming.
I came across this article and I pointed it out to you earlier this week, as we both always look for news items, and I think this is significant for those who listen to the podcast. Many of you probably are aware of delis. I hope you're aware. I hope you had a good pastrami or corned beef. Unfortunately, I've traveled in some places where it says deli on the outside and you go in, and at least from my experience, I'm wondering, how could they call this place a deli? I mean, you can't even get a a decent corned beef or pastrami, their idea of a deli is sliced ham and prosciutto.
Yeah, that's
It just doesn't work for me. But there's an article that talked about a particular deli in New York, and this contributor, who is a food critic, is lamenting about how it's hard to find a good deli.
Mm.
And I'd like to talk about that with you, because you've eaten at one of the most famous, which is Katz's in
Yeah.
New York.
yeah.
I've eaten there as well. Oh, the sandwich alone, it must weigh about 4 pounds. A regular serving, hand cut by Jewish people who've been trained to cut this particular pastrami and
That's
corned beef.
that's the important thing too. I mean, you're talking about this isn't cut by a machine.
Nope, it's hand done. In fact, you could go to the counter and they'll let you taste it. They'll cut it right at the place, and you say, "Oh, I want to lean a lot." That's many Jewish people.
Yeah.
I want lean corned beef, not the fatty stuff. Lean or pastrami or whatever it is. Uh, the idea of a good deli that serves matzo balls or
Mm.
kreplach or uh, borscht, and some people will have no idea what I'm talking about.
If you're on YouTube right now watching, I'm holding up pictures that hopefully are making you hungry to want to go to a deli.
Yeah, it's hard to. People are lamenting this. This food critic is even lamenting. It's hard to find a good deli today, and you know, I happen to be interested in sociology and culture and food, and Jewish people themselves are turning away from uh, a deli kind of diet, the
Really?
Eastern European, because
It's
it
fat.
clogs your
Yep.
heart, your arteries,
Yep.
and it's no good for you, and all those kinds of things. We have a lot of vegetarian people who are Jewish now, and all those kinds of things. I have no issue with that.
I love this, Steve. In the article, it says the quote unquote cardiologist special features pastrami tongue, chicken liver pate for those who have some serious hunger.
Oh,
The
I'm telling-
cardiologist special.
You know, I have talked to Gentiles about tongue. I grew up, my mother prepared a tongue just about every week. Uh, if it's sliced thin with mustard and a rye bread, it's unbelievably good. But you talk to some people, and this is outside of rural America. You talk to somebody in rural America, they might have never met a Jewish person, but they eat every part of the animal, tongue, and love it.
Yeah.
But you talk to a typical city slicker, the idea of eating a tongue, a cow's tongue, oh, it's just disgusting to them. Well, or liver pate in France, they get it. But I grew up on chopped liver. Who doesn't like chopped liver? But
A lot of people.
that's right. Which is why a good deli is hard to find. It's just becoming less attractive. But a whole set of Eastern European or Ashkenazi Jews, it's just not supporting it any longer. But I'll tell you, if you go at a good deli, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and we had a place called Corky and Lenny's. It's still in business. I go there whenever I go into Cleveland.
You have one near your house too, Moishanitzi's, right?
Moishanitzi's. Oh, these are great places. And in fact, we used to teach a course, Chris, in our Institute of Jewish Studies, and we now teach it in Equip. It's called Jewish Customs and Culture. But I had an assignment back then that I wanted them to go to a deli. Their assignment. I wish somebody would have given me this in school. Go to a deli, sit in the deli, order a Jewish food, and then write a short paper on the people who come, on the food you ate, the atmosphere. There is nothing like a deli. It's loud. The smells, the aroma are fantastic. The pastrami, the gefilte fish, the matzo ball soup, the potato latkes. It goes on, and I can't take it because I'm hungry already.
Well, if you have a deli near you, here's the encouragement: go to your local deli,
Go there. You'll
and
love it.
have a pastrami sandwich, get some matzo ball soup. Steve, too, we're fortunate because we live in the Northeast, where delis probably still have a good root. I mean, this is where they kind of started to originate out of.
Yes.
As the Eastern Orthodox or Eastern European Jewish community was coming over. But as you go further into Midwest, you start to lose, especially if you leave the cities, you start to lose the deli. There's delis in LA as the Jewish community was moving out there. But I really think the heart of the deli is here in the Northeast, in New York City, in Philadelphia, and in these areas around here.
In fact, I've watched the Food Network, and a number of times they've highlighted New York people who have moved to places like Houston or Dallas, and they brought their deli, New York deli, to the South, Southwest, and they interview the people who come, and they say, "Man, until this person came and this deli opened up, you couldn't find a good pastrami sandwich, but the guy came from New York.
Yep.
This is where all the Jewish people are coming because they recognize a good deli."
No, I lived in Dallas growing up here, but I lived in Dallas for a little bit, and it is hard to find those staples in the South and the Midwest and things in those areas. But hopefully we keep the tradition going, deli tradition. Whenever we bring people here and people come, especially in our encounter program, we take them to a
That's
deli.
a great point. We, in our encounter group, which is encountering Judaism, exposing people who live in places where they really don't know many Jewish people, they come in several days. We expose them to New York Jewry, to Philadelphia Jewry. They have a Shabbat that they celebrate.
Yep.
And get the Jewish atmosphere. It's fantastic.
Steve, would you say a deli is Yiddishkeit?
I would say that familiarity with deli definitely Yiddish.
What is Yiddishkeit?
Yiddishkeit is Jewish thought, Jewish lifestyle. It's in Yiddish we say you have a Yiddish cup. My wife is Gentile, but she has a Yiddish cup. What's that mean? It's a Jewish head.
Yeah.
She understands the Jewish people. I've not been a great teacher to her. I'm not a good representation of it, but she gets it. And when you do and you understand the nuances of the Jewish people, it helps. Just like Chris, we were talking about interpretation. Isn't it helpful to understand Jewish culture and life with the background of when Jesus comes? It opens up the text.
Yes.
So if you don't like pastrami or corned beef or matzo ball soup or whatever, I'm not telling you to like it, but I am saying that if you sample a place and just take the time to look around and listen, it's going to give you the heartbeat of the Jewish people, and that will help you understand them.
Well, so we want to go from a Yiddishkeit aspect of a deli to the Yiddish word of the day. You know what I'm going to start doing too, Steve? I've been telling myself, we need to get like a sound to introduce our Yiddish word. We need like a chime of some sort,
to indicate it's time for the Yiddish word.
I'm going to come up with that, but let's go ahead and get started with the Yiddish word of the day.
The Yiddish word for today is schluffen.
Schluffen.
Or I always make it more Jewish by putting an E at the end. Remember, we talked about Colin Powell and how the Jewish family that he was with, the furniture owner, he didn't call him Colin, he called him Kali.
Yeah, that was last week.
That's a endearment, putting an E at the end. So the word is schluffen, but I always talk about, let's go schluffy. We put an E at the end. And what schluffen or schluffy mean? It means to sleep, to go to sleep. I've been MC for a long time at Friends of Israel's conferences. And when we have them, we have morning services, speaking engagements. Then they have free time. And then in the evening, when the day is over, after whatever they did in the afternoon and 3 services in the morning and 2 in the evening, I say, make sure you go home and go schluffy, go to sleep.
Yep.
And wake up refreshed. Sleep. And so we think about sleep. I think of my grandkids when they were born, and I had the opportunity to hold each one of them. And one of the things you want to do is you take their little head and you just rest it on your shoulder and you say, go schluffy, go to sleep, and you rock them. It's an endearing term. It's really a word. It's sleep. But Jewish people use it as an endearment, as a loving thing. Go schluffy. We want to go schluffen. So I was thinking in the Bible.
Well, can I read something too? Because
go ahead.
You were right about the idea when I was doing a little research on this, on schluffy. It is an endearment to a child. You would say to your child, go schluffy.
Exactly.
But I came across this. There's a synagogue in Rockaway, New Jersey, that has a Shluffy Shabbat.
You told me that before we started the podcast, and I said I would send my kids to that. That sounds so fantastic. You want to understand Shabbat? Go to a Shluffy Shabbat.
This is what it is. Join our next Shluffy Shabbat. Bring the kids in their jammies, and we have a half hour of singing and stories before milk and cookies.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
The Shluffy Shabbat.
So let's take this word, which we're having a great time in, and I thought about it. There's a passage in Daniel, and this is humorous but very serious at the same time.
Yes.
In Daniel chapter 12 and verse 2, it says, "Those who sleep in the dust of the earth." Now, sleep there is used as a word to connotate death, but nonetheless, that's those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. In other words, everybody who dies is going to awake.
Mm-hmm.
Some to everlasting life. Oh, that's Chris. That's everlasting life. Sign me up.
Yep.
But some to everlasting shame and contempt.
Yes.
That's not so good.
No.
Not so good. So everybody's going to go sleep. They're going to go schluffy.
They're going to go schluffy.
We're going to go schluffy in death. Where do you want to wake up? You don't want to wake up from your schluffy in shame and contempt. You do want to wake up from your schluffy in the arms of the Savior. What a picture. You know, we talk about children. You rest their head on their shoulder. Every grandparent loves that. You smell the baby. There's nothing like the smell of a newborn baby. I can't get enough of it. So they're resting on your arm and you're saying, oh, go schluffy. You're rocking them. And then when they wake up, they look around and they see a face that they know, their mom, their dad, their grandparent, and they smile. You've seen that with 4 kids.
Yep.
We want that to be a smile. We don't want them to wake up, look around and say, oh, no.
You know, people, this struck me when I learned this years ago. That verse that you gave, Daniel 12:2, to me gets played out in the Gospel of John over and over again. The idea that when you die, of course, you go to be if you're a believer, you go to be in the presence of the Lord. But when you die, Daniel calls it sleeping. And it's the idea that your body's, you're not completely gone. That's not that you actually do soul sleep. It's that you're gone. Like your body's just kind of asleep, which means it's going to wake up again at some point.
Yep.
That's what Daniel's trying to get at, or as the Lord's communicating to him. But that at some point, everyone's going to wake up. That means everybody resurrects. Some people they wake up from their schluffy. Some people, like you said, wake up to everlasting life, eternal life, and some people to everlasting shame and contempt, which is what we would call hell. And I this is so interesting because I think John picks up on this in one of the most important verses. It's the verse that I think everybody knows, John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, the idea of everlasting contempt, but shall have eternal life. And even when you get to John chapter 6, he begins, John chapter 6, he begins to talk about, 5:28. It says, do not be amazed at this, for a time is coming when all who are in their graves, those who are schluffy, will hear his voice and come out. Those who have done what is good will rise to life, and those who have done evil will rise to be condemned. That same imagery of waking up from your schluffy, from your schluffin, and you have what you do now on this side of life is going to determine how you wake up on the other side.
That's an important concept, Chris, and it's true. We're taking an endearing term, schluffy, and we're taking it and imposing it on the text. And really, the Apostle Paul said, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they might be saved. We could take what Paul is saying and amplify it for here, you and me, Chris, and any believer. Our heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that anybody we come in contact with, and we want all people, that's the will of God, all people to be saved.
Mm-hmm.
We want to give them the message because we know this, except for a generation who are raptured. And we don't know, so far that hasn't happened. There hasn't been one generation that has happened to. But except for that, everybody's going schluffing.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's going to wake up in one or two places. That's a serious thing.
Yep, everybody's guaranteed to Shluffy.
That's the question is when they wake up, where will they be?
That's right. And listen, if you're listening right now, maybe this is the first time you've ever interacted with this concept, and you want to wake up in the presence of the Lord. Man, I want to encourage you to contact us here at Friends of Israel so that we can talk to you about how you can have eternal life, life everlasting, as Daniel calls it, life everlasting, as Jesus calls it. We want to show you how you can have life everlasting. That when you wake up after you die, you know that you are going to be in the presence of the Lord. You can contact us here at FOI by going to our website, foi.org. We have fantastic resources and people who are willing to talk to you. A fantastic way to end our program,
Great
Steve.
way.
Listen, we are the Jew and Gentile podcast. It's been fantastic to be with you. We've discussed so much today. Listen, I want to encourage you to sign up for our FOI Equip classes by going to gofoi.org/what on earth. You can join Tom Simcox and all of our teachers, really, who are going to be teaching our FOI Equip classes. You can sign up and be a part of what we're doing. I want to remind you that the Jew and Gentile podcast is a ministry of FOI Equip, which is an outreach of North American ministries and the Friends of Israel Gospel Ministry. The Friends of Israel Gospel Ministry is a worldwide evangelical ministry that's teaching biblical truth about Israel and the Messiah while bringing spiritual and physical comfort to the Jewish people. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you next week. All right.